We all thought Thomas Brown would step in as interim head coach. The Chicago Bears would rally around him and pull off an impressive win against the San Francisco 49ers. Instead, it was a stark reminder of just how many problems still persist on this team and how changing the head coaches can't fix all of it.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use our promo code LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. On the show today, try and figure out some of what went wrong against the San Francisco 49ers, but some of this is just, it's a bad football team. And changing a head coach doesn't change that it's still a bad football team. But we'll start with this Bears defense getting gashed way more than we've seen all year, and that can't all be just, oh, you fire Matt Eberflus and the defense is bad. There's more to it than just that. The offense struggled too, but that's kind of becoming same old, but we were kind of still hoping for and expecting better from that group as well. And then I want to try and figure out where things go from here and maybe find a couple of positives of what Thomas Brown was able to do as interim head coach. But I think the story of this game for me was less about the offense starting slow again for the 13th game of the year. I mean, really, every single week it feels like they start slow. But it was the defense really getting gashed from the beginning and thoroughly throughout the first half. Maybe picked up a little bit in the second half, but not much, if we're being honest. And that was something that had been maybe trending in that direction in recent weeks, but we didn't necessarily expect it to get like that bad that quickly, right? When you're giving up 300 yards to the 49ers in the first half, and what I think it was, they had 24 of their points in the first half. It was 24-0 at halftime there, where the Bears offense had like 4 yards, the 49ers had like 300. Like, sure, we've seen the Bears defense give up a couple touchdowns, give up some big yards sometimes in the first half. I mean, they were trailing, was it 16-0 to the Lions in the first half? Last week when you came back, yeah, okay, this defense had to been showing more vulnerability and more cracks and just not as sharp as we had come to expect them. But this was just a whole nother level here, where it felt like, boy, in the running game, the 49ers were pushing that line of scrimmage back, way back. The Bears could not get any sort of consistent push up front. And it wasn't Christian McCaffrey running all over you. Sometimes, when it happened to James Conner and the Cardinals earlier this season, sometimes you can tip your cap a little bit and say, that's a good running back and a really good running game on the other side, and they're just going to get your number sometime. But when we're talking about third-string running back Isaac Guerendo, who's got some great speed and has some talent for sure, but this is the 49ers' third choice at running back because the two guys ahead of him are injured, and he still gets over 5 yards per carry, 2 touchdowns, 78 yards on the ground to break away a couple of longer runs in there as well. The Bears are just getting blown off the line of scrimmage up front, first and foremost. That's where this starts in the running game. That's Zach Pickens not playing well. That's Byron Cowart not playing well. Javon Dexter, some up and down moments in this game as well. Got hurt, so I can't hold that against him by any means, but it's those guys making life difficult for T.J. Edwards and Tremaine Edmonds, who were also a little tentative, a little slow. They weren't not slow physically, but slow to react and attack in the running game. They're letting blockers come up to them instead of hitting it downhill and really reading their keys and attacking downhill. And the 49ers would just gash them left and right in the ground game, which then made life pretty easy for Brock Purdy in the passing game, where it felt like, man, just huge holes in the Bears' zone. They dropped back in coverage, and the 49ers just hit them over and over again with those crossing routes and the backside dig routes, just any kind of in-breaking routes over the middle of the field. The 49ers found every single time where TJ Edwards or Tremaine Edmonds, where you'd be behind the linebackers but in front of the safeties, or kind of in that spot like between the linebackers and cornerbacks, but just everywhere in the vicinity of like make the linebacker have to guard two guys and figure out which guy he's going to be closer to and then throw it to the other one. There's a lot of those sort of high-low reads where linebackers got someone in front of him and someone behind him, so you just layer it through underneath over the top, and the Bears just never had an answer for that and seemed to struggle to adjust play calling wise to maybe try and do something a little bit different there. I mean, they came to some man coverage in the second half. We saw Jalen Johnson make a really nice pass breakup in there, but it really never seemed to adjust to what the 49ers were doing to gash them in those areas over and over and over again. It reminded me of, I think it was back in 2022, Matt Eberflus' first year. It was a stretch, when the Bills and the Lions at the end of the year, where Ben Johnson, especially in that game, just kept hitting it over and over again, those same routes to the same area of the field. And you're just sitting there, pulling your hair out wondering like, hey, they keep doing the same thing. Do you do something different? Just make them have to beat you in some other way. And then you compound that with just a pretty overall lack of pass rush in this game, where Brock Purdy could sit back there and have a pretty clean pocket to work with the majority of the time. They blitzed him a little bit, but really didn't get home on much of it. They sacked him once, but had him under pressure on a total of 7 plays in this game. I mean, he could just kind of sit back there, slice and dice and crossing route over and over, up and down the middle of the field. And it's like, you don't even know like where to start with cleaning things up defensively, because it just feels like everything was going wrong. Okay, you can't stop the run or stop the pass. Is there anything then that you can do? I mean, I think generally the Bears didn't miss a ton of tackles. I think there were a lot of plays where they would tackle a guy and the guy would get 3 or 4 yards after contact, like carrying the defender. Like they weren't good, solid, get him to the ground tackles, but it didn't feel like it was super sloppy in that regard. I mean, Kevin Byard took a really bad angle on one of the Isaac Guerrero's big runs, Guerrero, excuse me. One of his big runs, like there were some bad angles from players, but like generally they weren't horrible tackling. I think it was a normal amount of like, NFL players miss tackles sometimes in games. That's how it goes. Like that's one area where, okay, maybe they tackled decently, but man, you just didn't have answers. And it feels like my first game calling plays for defensive coordinator Eric Washington, and all of a sudden you question a little bit how well he can adjust and adapt. I don't want to give Matt Eberflus a ton of credit here, but we did see this Bears defense under Eberflus go into halftime and come out in the second half and do things differently and find ways to stop the bleeding a lot of the times. And that didn't really feel like the case in this one. Like it put Edmonds and Edwards in a tough position. In particular, I think they're gonna get a lot of the target stats because it was the middle of the field, but like they're covering somebody else, man. Like they're in an impossible position, and that's what makes somebody like Kyle Shanahan so good as an offensive mind, and why a lot of teams struggle against the 49ers offense, just maybe not as much this year. And that's where the concern is. And that's where, okay, I don't think if Matt Eberflus still was the head coach of this game, would the defense have played a little better? Maybe. I don't know. But they weren't winning the game if Matt Eberflus was the coach, because you're still giving up 30-plus points and you're still only scoring 13. And that's where we come back to the ever-persistent offensive issues, that we were on this nice positive trajectory with Thomas Brown as offensive coordinator, took a step back this week, and the job doesn't get any easier from here. So we'll take a look at another slow start from this Bears offense with still some positives, some Caleb Williams in there, next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by Hillsdale College. Hillsdale College is offering more than 40 free online courses. That's right, no cost online higher education for you to continue your lifelong learning or just pique your curiosity, whether you want to go through some of their cool history classes like Constitution 101 and the rise and fall of the Roman Republic. Or they've got economics classes, chemistry classes, math classes, even a documentary style class. There's a bunch of different ways you can take it all in. And they're all self-paced at Hillsdale, so you can start whenever you want and tune in wherever you are. Plus, you can then go deeper with readings and quizzes and discussions. Or if you just want to enjoy the lectures, that's fine too. Just go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. The Locked On Bears podcast is also brought to you by Prize Picks. If you love watching the game, then you're going to love Prize Picks because it's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Whether it's football, basketball, or any of your favorite sports, Prize Picks can make your holidays bigger and brighter. You can win up to 200 times your money on Prize Picks. And this holiday season, they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Picksmas, and they're offering 2 free picks in December. And when your picks hit, Prize Picks makes it easy to cash out, so you can get your money in as fast as 15 minutes. Whether it's Caleb Williams' passing yards or DeAndre Swift's rushing yards or any of your favorite players in favorite sports, Prize Picks is the best way to get in on the daily fantasy sports action. Download the Prize Picks app today and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly when you just play $5 at Prize Picks. Run your game. The Bears offense didn't make life easier for the defense when they're going 3 and out. They're only getting 4 yards in the first half. The defense is on the field a lot. The time of possession is skewed quite a bit, and you're really on your heels. And everything's on the offenses, on the 49ers offense, everything's on the table for them. But then as your offense starts to fall down more and more and more, they're behind the scoreboard. They're trying to press and get back into the game, and it's just sort of this self-building problem. So it cycles itself for the Bears here. And so, I think I look at the issues on the offensive side of the ball and see Caleb Williams again, not very confident in this game, just feeling very tentative. And we've seen over the course of this season, he oftentimes has a tendency to hold on to the ball too long. And that continues to be a problem and something you'd like to see him get better at. But I think what we saw in this game in particular felt like even another step beyond that, right? Yes, he's holding on to the ball too long, but he's just like not decisive in any of his actions. And that's what feels a little bit different. It's like we saw a couple games ago that when something wasn't there, he was taking off and scrambling, and he's always been so good at escaping in the pocket. Even when maybe he's holding on to the ball too long, he can escape the pressure and maybe take off and scramble or extend the play and get out of the pocket and just make something happen. And it felt like he was tentative even in leaving the pocket, even in taking off, even in scrambling, right? Like he was, whether he was overthinking everything or what, it's like he has to know that he either has to deliver the ball quickly or get out of there. And he wasn't doing either. And that's where something felt like next level off there. It's like, okay, sure. We've seen him hold the ball too long, but okay, in those games when he's holding on the ball too long, he'll still get out of the pocket and make some nice scrambles. And we finally saw that in the fourth quarter, and maybe a little bit in the third quarter, but at the very end, he remembered that he can scramble, and that was very nice. But throughout that game, it's like you got to either have a quick pass option there or an ability to escape and just kind of make something happen. Like that's the playmaking ability of Caleb Williams, and we just didn't see him playing in that type of like playmaker mentality and mode, even as they got farther and farther behind on the scoreboard. So the pressure comes less and less, right? It's just like, oh, well, we're losing by 2 touchdowns anyway. Might as well try and make a play here. And you just couldn't get it going. Like, felt like generally the pass protection from the offensive line wasn't that bad. There were bad moments for sure, but there were plenty of plays where he's got some time and just can't find anybody or is not pulling the trigger on players that open. And the 49ers sat back in a lot of zone coverage there. And I'm sure they did that to try and take away some of that scrambling ability because eyes are on the quarterback there. But even just scrambling behind the line of scrimmage and extending plays, we didn't see Caleb Williams do a ton of. And it doesn't help that couldn't get the running game going. Thought the run blocking was a little bit more troublesome than the pass blocking was in this game. And so, you're not able to make your down and distances a little bit more manageable there. You're not able to control the clock, extend drives. You can become pretty one-dimensional when you're down 3 scores at halftime of this game. They got back to the running game at the start of the third quarter, and credit to Thomas Brown for, again, finding good halftime adjustments for this Bears offense so that they could come out and have that, 9-minute drive to start the third quarter, march down and just sort of reestablish some stuff and say, hey, there's still a pulse, right? We're not dead yet. The heart is still beating. Obviously, it didn't extend into the rest of the third and fourth quarter the way it had the previous 3 weeks, but still, you got something to build on there, right? It wasn't all disaster from the Bears offense. It was just the same old lack of rhythm, lack of confidence, super, super slow start there. But then you get the running game going to the start of the third quarter, a nice long drive, and a beautiful touchdown catch by Rome Odunze. It was a nice throw from Caleb Williams as well. But Odunze in the corner of the end zone goes up for it, gets both feet in bounds. Definitely learned from, it was the preseason, right? When his feet landed out of bounds, he was running in the back of the end zone and found the end line because it was painted green. Or it wasn't painted, it was green like grass. This time, he knew exactly where that end line was, and the body control to get those feet together and inbounds while making the catch is super, super impressive. And those are the kind of plays like, yeah, that's why you draft Rome Odunze in the top 10. That's why you take him in that spot. And even when you already have DJ Moore and Keenan Allen, it wasn't like Rome had some huge production game in terms of passing yards or in terms of receiving yards, because Caleb only had 134 to go around. But those 2 touchdowns to Rome, both very nice plays, especially the first one there was like wow stuff from your rookie wide receiver, and reminds you like, oh yeah, future's going to be pretty bright with that one. A little disappointed with Cole Kmet not catching the 2-point conversion play right after that, but again, not the difference in this game. He catches that ball great. You have 8 points instead of 6 there, but okay, whatever. Bears find a way to make mistakes there. Like with Caleb Williams' pump fake backwards pass fumble fiasco there, where it's just like, I don't know, that feels like kind of dumb, stupid luck, where he's pump faking and trying to stop and the ball slips out, but he happens to go backwards and fumble, and that just feels very Bears, right? Like, you've got some momentum. You had a couple touchdowns. The offense is slowly climbing back in the way they had the previous 3 weeks, really, or previous 2 weeks for sure. And then that turnover there, which was like totally accidental and just kind of a fluky play, but it absolutely took all of the wind out of the Bears' sails and really did them in. I mean, I think it was before the second touchdown, but everything kind of just melted down from there, and you never really got, like, the fourth quarter was not a highly productive offensive quarter for the Bears. At the very beginning, Caleb Williams drives down and gets the second one to Rome Odunze, and then from there, the defense gets run over again. The offense stutters and stumbles out of there, and then eventually you put in Tyson Bagent, which, like, credit to Thomas Brown for not leaving your rookie quarterback in the fourth quarter of a blowout. Like, that's something I'm not sure Matt Eberflus would have done. We've seen Matt Eberflus be inclined to leave Caleb Williams out there too long and risk an injury, and especially when you watched Brock Purdy get lit up in this game and exit with an injury and then come back in, like, you're down 38-14 or 38-13, whatever it was. Take your quarterback out. There's however many minutes was there left in the game. 2 minutes left in the game after the Jonathan Owens interception, which, like, credit to him, there's a positive on defense there, but it's Brandon Allen. It's not Brock Purdy. They have got their backup quarterback in. You can put your backup quarterback in. You're down way too many scores. There's not enough time. It's just kind of nice, like, and it's embarrassing that we have to count that as a victory. Like a small win is like, hey, your coach figured out to take out your quarterback at the end of the fourth quarter, but, like, we got to find some positives where we can. And I think there were a couple things about how Thomas Brown operated as interim head coach that we can point to as, silver lining here. Not to say like, oh yeah, everything's fine because of these little one or two things, but like, okay, it wasn't all disaster. It was bad. It was bad pretty well across the board, but there was some good in there too. Some small signs of encouragement, like, hey, he did some stuff that Matt Eberflus wouldn't do, or vice versa. Didn't do some things that Matt Eberflus would do in ways that shows self-awareness and maybe just see bits of progress, even if there wasn't much progress anywhere else. And we'll kind of figure out, okay, then where do they go from here after such a bad loss? That's next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, FanDuel is getting new customers hooked up with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Whether you bet on this Bears 49ers game, or you want to bet ahead on Bears Vikings, or any of your other favorite sports, we got, NBA, NHL, soccer, tennis, combat sports. I mean, you name it, they've got it all on the FanDuel app. And right within that app, you can also place live bets on the NFL and all your favorite sports, all in one place. So if you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get your $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. There's a lot of bad in this Bears loss to the 49ers. Offense, slow as usual, same old, same story there. Defense, absolutely gashed. And you look ahead and you're like, oh man, okay, so terrible against the 49ers. And what's next? The Minnesota Vikings. And after that, the Detroit Lions. Oh, crap. Like this team, is this team screwed? Is this team going to win another game this season? I'm not here to, I think they will still win one more game this season. We'll see. I mean, it's 4 tough games, but like, I think they've got something. I don't think Thomas Brown's going to go totally win this year. I think they'll find a way to get something going, but it's 4 playoff teams. So they, if they could lose out and finish with 4 wins this year, holy moly, that would be a disaster of a season. But okay, a lot of bad. Is there some good here that we can find? Like, where do we go from here? The thing that stood out to me right away was penalties. The Bears consistently had pre-snap penalties and issues over and over and over again during the Matt Eberflus era. Discipline was an issue. And in this game, 2 penalties total for the Bears. I was just going to funnel through quick and double check what they were. It was the roughing the passer on Darrell Taylor in the fourth quarter. And then at the very end, Tarvarius Moore had the unnecessary roughness also late there in the fourth quarter. But they went through the first 3 quarters without a single penalty on the Bears. And notice, none of those are pre-snap penalties. It's a roughing the passer where he jumped up to swat the ball and, landed on the quarterback's head and all that stuff. Okay, and then the Tarvarius Moore was on the punt, the unnecessary roughness on the punt. Like, okay, maybe there's a discipline thing there, but like, no false starts, no holding, no pass interference. Like, things the Bears had been doing consistently week after week after week under Matt Eberflus. For the guy that was supposed to be the hustle and culture and technique guy, they were very sloppy and very undisciplined under Eberflus. And Thomas Brown, in his first press conference as interim head coach, says penalties. Hey, pre-snap penalties, that's a focus thing. We got to be dialed in, and we're going to work on that. Post-snap penalties, that's a technique thing, and we as coaches got to teach it better. To his credit, 2 penalties. They're both 15-yard penalties. They're big penalties. But only 2 to the 49ers' 7 makes a pretty big difference. Obviously, again, not the difference between winning and losing, but that's a much more disciplined football team, just in terms of not getting in their own way. Or you think about the operation from the sideline there. You didn't have any delay of game penalties there. You didn't have those situations where the play calling is super slow getting in, and so Caleb Williams has to burn a timeout or get everybody up to the line of scrimmage and try and scramble and get everything, and then something goes wrong or whatever, and it just felt like that part of the operation was a lot more smooth. And again, we're not there on the sidelines seeing everything, and maybe there was more issues with that than we could tell, but for the most part, that felt like improvement. And we watched Kyle Shanahan throw 3 challenge flags. Thomas Brown didn't throw a stupid challenge flag. That also feels to me like positive. And Shanahan made some good challenges. That was not a reflection of Shanahan, but we know that Eberflus was terrible at throwing the challenge flag, when to throw it, and making poor decisions there. I predicted on Friday's podcast that Thomas Brown wouldn't throw a challenge flag in this game, and I was right. Not that that's a super hard prediction here, but still, I think the fact that he didn't just throw one after a big play, because there were plenty of big plays where he could have thrown one. Remember that Eberflus said, hey, on an explosive play, we want to throw the challenge flag just to be sure. There were plenty of those in there where we could have thrown the challenge flag, and, well, maybe not plenty, but at least a few. And the Bears didn't, and to their credit, they're at least getting some operational things improved in a way that reflects Thomas Brown's ability to lead and instill discipline in a group that absolutely needed it. The problem is, if you're losing to the San Francisco 49ers 38-13, and that's a 6-win 49ers team that's as injured as anybody, what's going to happen next week when you've got a really good Minnesota Vikings team, or the week after when you got a really good Detroit Lions team? I think back, we talked about it on Friday's podcast, the San Francisco 49ers defense ranked 24th in the NFL, and you could only get 13 points on them. What happens when it's the Vikings' 5th-ranked defense next week, or the Detroit Lions' 2nd-ranked defense? I should say those rankings are entering Sunday, so I don't after Sunday's games, I don't have updated defensive rankings yet. But right, top 5 defenses in your next 2 games, and you could only score 13 points against a 24th-ranked defense. We saw the Bears score on both of these 2 top 5 ranked defenses 2 weeks ago, so maybe you've got some hope there saying, okay, Thomas Brown had figured out the Vikings and Lions defenses a little bit. So maybe he can get back to some better things against them than he could against a worse 49ers defense. Like, it's counterintuitive, right? Like, that's why it's like hard to be confident that, they're going to get it rolling. And same thing on the other side of the ball. When you talk about this Bears defense trying to go up against these offenses, they gave up 38 points to the 49ers, who rank 16th in offense, middle of the pack. But then you've got the Minnesota Vikings, who rank 9th, and the Detroit Lions, who rank 1st. 2 top 10 offenses, 2 top 5 defenses in your next 2 games. I'm kind of torn between they're screwed and they just played those 2 teams close, so they should be able to play them close again. Like, nothing really has changed since playing the Lions on Thanksgiving and playing the Lions again in 2 weeks on the field, right? Obviously, Matt Eberflus, but like, nothing has gotten worse. You haven't really, for the team that played the Lions on Thanksgiving to the team that played the 49ers, I can't think of like a super, super major difference there. I mean, DJ Moore is banged up. Keenan Allen's a little banged up. DeAndre Swift a little banged up. Roshan Johnson was out. Like, a couple of guys are injured more now than they were, but that's not the difference between 38-13 and almost beating the Detroit Lions on Thanksgiving. Like, there's something really off here, and maybe they can find the juice and bring it back together for a divisional game, that maybe they kind of get amped up for division stuff, and then there's a little bit of a letdown when you go to San Francisco, 49ers across country, not really a rivalry there, not really a game that has as much stakes to it because you're eliminated from the playoffs, so who cares? But like, division games, we can get up for a division game and play the Vikings hard and play the Lions hard and maybe wrap up the season playing the Packers hard. I mean, we'll see exactly what it's going to take, but at least you can point to, okay, Thomas Brown has cleaned some things up operationally, and so then if they can get back to some of the X's and O's stuff they were doing the last 3 weeks, maybe there can be some semblance of a hope here of winning at least one more football game. Like, is that so much to ask here? Honestly, I think the bigger concern for me is Eric Washington as defensive coordinator. Super, super vanilla play calling, not great adjustments, not really getting creative in the fronts or in coverage, and just sort of sticking to the basics. And the 49ers tore up the basics. And Kevin O'Connell is going to tear up the basics. And Ben Johnson's going to tear up the basics. So Eric Washington needs to find some answers here, because he's making Thomas Brown look bad. And he might be the thing that gets in the way of Thomas Brown becoming the Bears head coach. It's because the defensive coordinator's not doing a good job. But Thomas Brown didn't pick that defensive coordinator. He was already here, but what can you do? He can only put out so many fires, and that's kind of the lesson of the podcast today, right? Thomas Brown comes in, can't fix everything. There's a lot of things that are wrong with this team that are a lot bigger than just who the head coach was, and that's where it's going to be a tough end of the year. But I do want to, though, this week on the podcast, go bigger picture and kind of look at, okay, like, coaching's been a problem, but talent seems to be part of the problem here too. And maybe this team isn't quite as talented as we might have thought they were or think they are, and kind of take stock of, like, where does this roster stand right now, and how does that reflect on Ryan Poles? That'll be part of the conversation later this week on the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit the subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you're looking for a second listen, check out our Locked On NFL show, breaking down all the biggest storylines from football from the league-wide perspective. It comes out twice a day, once in the morning with Tyler Rowland, the madman who gets you fired up. It's your shot of football espresso first thing in the morning. And then in the afternoon, you can chill with Tony Wiggins in the barbershop, getting some straight football talk all throughout your day here in the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Coming back tomorrow, make Locked On Bears your first listen once again for your next opportunity to bear down.